This is Prescription Life with Dr. Matthew Harrison on Carolina Catholic Radio Charlotte, 1270 AM. Now here is your host for Prescription Life, Dr. Matthew Harrison.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Dr. Matthew Harrison, and we are at Prescription Life. This is where we talk about the ethical delivery and promotion of healthcare kind of through the lens of Catholic ethical awareness and how can that best be done. I'm very excited today. I have an old friend on the show with me today. Dr. Grattan Brown has written and taught Catholic theology for over 20 years, helped launch Thales College in Raleigh, North Carolina, worked in religion and public policy at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C., and served on the Hospital Ethics Committee at Carolinas Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina for 10 years. He earned a graduate degree in literature and philosophy and a doctorate in theology at the Lateran University. He has published articles on medical ethics, theology, scripture, and the liberal arts, which are linked on his website, whereiswisdom.today. That's all, whereiswisdom.today. Grattan lives with his wife and 3 daughters in Fairfax, Virginia. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Brown.
Well, thank you, Dr. Harrison. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I love what you're doing with this radio program.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to kind of get it off the ground, and I'm very excited about all the guests and the different areas of expertise. A lot of the times I'm going to be talking about just strict medical stuff or strict topics such as maybe just euthanasia or just abortion or something like that. But today, it's great to have you on kind of towards the beginning of the programming so that we can kind of set a framework for Catholic ethics and what does that mean when we're talking about medicine and healthcare, and then also how do we apply that in today's landscape? I'm really excited about this.
Me too. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so we go back a bit. I am the medical director for the Student Health Center or Health Clinic at Belmont Abbey. And as a perk to that, I get to take a free class every once in a while. And so I decided to take a medical ethics course and thought it'd be fun. My studying days are kind of behind me. But I thought it'd be interesting to go so that maybe at least the students that are there might get a little bit of real world experience about, what happens, in the real world with medical ethics, with making these decisions. And that was a fantastic class. I had a good excuse to read articles and essays and literature that, I didn't have any other reason to read. And you challenged me with writing some papers, and it was a really great experience. You're a great teacher.
Well, thank you. And you were a great student, great presence in the class. You really helped us to see the real-life situations. I mean, I had been studying Catholic theology and philosophy and literature, as you mentioned, for quite a while. I had been seeing how the Catholic tradition has the intellectual resources to really make sense of healthcare, but people struggle to understand it. And part of the challenge is they don't understand, the real life, all the different little circumstances, the decisions that doctors have to make, the decisions that families have to make, and how you use those, the wisdom of the Catholic tradition in order to work through all those details. But we got to explore that a lot more deeply in that course because you were there.
Yeah, so give me kind of just the basic framework, the basic understanding of what are Catholic ethics, where do they come into play in medical decision making and healthcare, and kind of their role in society and culture of life.
Well, since we're heading into Advent, let's talk about it in terms of the Incarnation.
Okay.
Catholic ethics, Christian ethics, really is the union of divine wisdom and intention in creating us the beautiful creatures that we are, and human reason at its best, trying to understand how to do good and avoid evil in this world. So, think about first of all, charity. And there's a beautiful line in 1 John chapter 4 about God acted so that we might live. God sent his Son into the world so that we might have life abundantly. And that's a terrific definition of love, because what it means is every time each one of us acts so that others live in a better way, no matter how small or large it is, that's love. But it also has to be done prudently and clearly and rightly, and that's where often the difficulty comes in. Medicine exists to relieve suffering. And suffering is, it's an evil, even when God brings good out of it. Moving from, the evil that death and suffering are to the good that medicine and divine grace and human effort can bring out of it, I think is really where you want to start to think about healthcare, and healthcare from a Christian perspective, and ultimately healthcare from a humane perspective, as in doing the best that we can for the people that we need. So how about we start there? We can get in a little bit more to mechanics of moral decision making, but how about we start there?
Yeah, so, one thing that comes up often, we live in a society that has very, very advanced health care, advanced medications, advanced procedures, and I've been to third world countries that have essentially next to nothing. So one of the things that comes up often, and this kind of gets into the prudent aspect of healthcare, and one of the major driving forces in healthcare today is the cost. And do we do everything humanly possible to try to fix something that's broken, in a person, or do we use those resources in other ways to help more people and relieve suffering, other sufferings? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Can you tell me a little bit more about what question you're asking? Are we talking more? Do you want to talk more about how we operate in the United States with many, many, many resources?
Sure.
Or how we operate in a more resource-scarce context?
Well, and the issue becomes pretty quickly that we're living in more and more of a worldwide community, and in a society where resources can be shifted, possibly, to other areas of the world, type of thing. So, how do we approach taking care of patients in a system that is very, very advanced medically and scientifically? How do we do that in a way that's ethical? Is it a situation where we only go with what the patient wants? Is it a situation where we go with everything possible that we can pull out all the stops and keep somebody alive forever? Where's the in between, and how do we arrive at that?
So there are a couple of things then you keep in mind. In good Aristotelian fashion, you avoid the extremes. So you don't do nothing. And to your point, we've got so many resources to do something. It's usually the other extreme that we end up avoiding, which is the other extreme is do everything possible. Some people, keep life sustained for as long as possible. Eventually shows its foolishness, really, because you can see it in the moral distress of medical teams when they think, well, we're almost torturing this person. And then sometimes you'll hear issues like euthanasia where, well, now we want to use medical technology in order to deliberately end a life. And really, I think the Catholic tradition has a measured response that starts with simple principles and enables you to work your way through with both, technical excellence, doing what we can do with excellence, and at the same time, respecting both the dignity of life, its beauty and its value, and at the same time, the fragility of life, where sometimes we just have to let go. And that simple framework is first of all, you ask, is the action that I'm doing ever good? Because there are some inherently evil actions. Euthanasia, elective abortion, being the two main ones. But if you're not doing something that nobody ever ought to do, well, then you move on to, well, what's the goal? Just because you can do a procedure doesn't mean that you should do it. What are you doing it for? How is it going to help this person's life? To what extent is it really going to heal the patient, restore functionality, and help the patient to pursue the good goals that person aspires to in life, to preserve the relationships that they have, and to be able to, as I said earlier, act so that other people might live better and show love. And then if what we call the act and the intention or the goal are there, then you get into the circumstances. And often the circumstances are a comparison of the benefits and the burdens. Some people might not like to hear me say that because they think, well, that's utilitarianism. But utilitarianism really reduces all ethical decision-making to a calculation of benefits over burdens. We're not saying that here because, we've excluded things like euthanasia, which are always wrong. And we've said, you've got to look at the reasons why you're doing a procedure. But if those two things are good, well, then what we really are doing is asking, we can use this procedure. And here is the discomfort and pain it's going to cause to the patient. And here's the benefit that we can expect that occurs in, 40, 60, 80% of cases. Here's what's going to cost. That's important too. We don't want to reduce everything to cost, but that's important. And so those are an example of a basic framework that the Catholic tradition uses in order to begin the thinking through some of the difficult decisions when these ethical issues come up.
Yeah, and we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, maybe we can talk a little bit about what is futile treatment versus other treatments that might provide some benefit, and we can maybe talk about a few little details there. So let's take a little break, and thank you, Dr. Brown, for joining us. We will be right back.
The Catholic Church sends us into a bruised and broken world. No matter how busy we are or how much we struggle to make sense of the madness around us, we are called to perform a work of great value for the evangelization of the world. In 2015, a small group of local media pioneers listened and answered this call of the Second Vatican Council, and Carolina Catholic Radio was born. Today, we are the Carolina Catholic Media Network and broadcast the truth of Jesus Christ on 7 distinct platforms to meet the demands of today's media consumers. Our network produces more original local programming than nearly any other EWTN affiliate nationwide, and each of our hosts are committed to educate, inform, inspire, and enrich lives no matter where they are on their journey of faith. Catholic media consumption has a direct impact on our lives. It helps us learn, teach, and practice our faith. And in a world that seeks to cancel the truth, we need it more than ever before. Now, through the end of 2022, we need your support and ask you to join our Circle of Friends giving campaign. As a Carolina Catholic community, we invite you to sponsor or join a circle with those whom you live, practice, and share passion for the faith. Consider sponsoring a circle to memorialize a loved one by asking your friends and family to donate to us in their honor. Or join a circle sponsored by your favorite local program host. There are many possibilities. It is together as a circle of friends, our voice, our community, and our faith will be strong, leaving a legacy for those who follow our footsteps. Join us today at carolinacatholicmedia.org.
Faith and charity are key elements of life, but are they at the center of your retirement planning and life insurance decisions? Knights of Columbus, a trusted organization with a proud history of more than 140 years of helping its members, can help Catholic families with insurance and retirement planning solutions. Most importantly, we do this in a way that is compatible with Catholic teaching and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' investment guidelines. Today, we have expanded our offerings to include retirement annuities, long-term care insurance, and disability income insurance. Beyond the benefits of financial protection, members may take satisfaction in knowing that Knights of Columbus contributes to causes that align with Catholic moral teaching. Let your faith inspire your financial decisions. Terms and conditions apply. Learn more by calling Field Agent Bob Gordon at 516-551-7838.
Welcome back, and I have today with me Dr. Grattan Brown, a Catholic ethicist, and we've really started to get into some of the topics regarding delivery of health care. And one thing I wanted to talk about was kind of when does treatment become futile? When do we make those decisions? Kind of famously, my confirmation saint, Pope John Paul II, few people have ever gotten to meet their confirmation saint. I'm probably one of the few people in the world because I did not become Catholic until 2015. I was 2 feet from him in about 2002, I think it was. And so I actually got to see my confirmation saint in person, which was pretty awesome. But famously, he had very advanced Parkinson's disease, and kind of famously at the end of his life, he refused a feeding tube. And so generally we think of feeding and water as not extraordinary means. And even if it includes a tube to do that, it's not much different than feeding a baby a bottle of formula or breast milk. So, Dr. Brown, I want to get your ideas about, when do we make those decisions about fetal care, and what is considered extraordinary care in the healthcare field?
Yeah, I'll start with a little story about medical futility. As you mentioned in the introduction, I spent 10 years serving on the ethics committee of Carolina's Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'll never forget one of his meetings in which, in the span of about 3 minutes, I heard medical futility about 3 different times. And one person said, "Oh, this case is futile, and this procedure is futile." And then somebody said, "The patient is futile." And I thought to myself, well, I know what you're trying to say, but this is certainly not the way to say it. And I started reading into the literature on medical futility because it was a term that I really was not familiar with. I am familiar with, and I was at that time familiar with, the concepts of ordinary and extraordinary means, but not medical futility. And as I read into the literature, I could see what a mess it was. And it boils down to this, really. Doctors invoke medical futility usually in order to end treatment over the objections of the family, and it's usually the family because the patient is often incapacitated. And I thought, well, there could be some times when a medical team would need to do that, but medical futility, as it was in the literature, was not really providing any good means for doing it. And it could very easily become exploitative.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked out and wrote a couple of papers on medical futility using the concepts of ordinary and extraordinary means in order to do it. And the gist of it's this: a procedure becomes futile when it no longer works. In other words, it no longer provides the benefit that it was designed to provide. There's no benefit at all.
And maybe I would add to that. I was just to interject. Maybe I'd add to that, or if it actually causes harm.
Well, if it causes harm, but medical futility means you can do something, but it's not going to have an effect.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't have an immediate effect, or maybe it's going to lose its effect before the goals of treatment are met. And that's the way I worked it out, because the way I look at it, and really the way that the Catholic tradition looks at something is, if it's a legitimate concept, we'll give it its legitimacy. But we'll also recognize how the principle or the concept can go off the rails. And so you mentioned a feeding tube. There's a good example. So as you were saying, a feeding tube is ordinary means, and it's ordinary means because typically, if you use a feeding tube, the benefit is great because the person gets fed, their body is nourished, it helps the healing process, and it keeps them alive. The burdens are pretty low. It does involve minor surgery. The cost is not terribly high. The food that is introduced through the tube is not terribly expensive. The biggest expense, I think, you can correct me if it's really the care that the person needs to receive, and that would be the most expensive part of it. Now, that same procedure can become extraordinary if, as the burdens begin to outweigh the benefits, or the benefits start to diminish. Well, what's the benefit? It's feeding, but if the pathological condition of the patient deteriorates to the point where, let's say, their digestive system is starting to fail, well, then you're not getting the benefit, and I think this, perhaps the point you were making a little while ago, it can start to cause harm as you're introducing food that can't be digested.
Right.
And then also, if the patient is in a dying process and is expected to die within a week or two, well, they're probably going to lose the desire to eat. Well, you're not making them eat because they got a feeding tube. But if they're dying for other reasons, and especially if their digestive system is shutting down, you can see where the benefits are slowly diminishing and the burdens are certainly increasing. And that really is enough to stop that treatment. Nobody is required or morally obligated to accept extraordinary means. And that at least is what John Paul II was doing when he declined a feeding tube toward the end of his life. When medical futility comes in, you've often got a fight or a conflict going on between a medical team and a family. Mm-hmm. So usually it's the family that wants to keep going and the medical team that says, we're not going to do CPR because not only do the burdens outweigh the benefits, but it's not even going to work. And sometimes it can be the doctor that wants to keep going and the family that says, no, we don't want to do this anymore. But in some, you've got ordinary means where the burdens outweigh the benefits from the perspective of the patient, usually, for the most part. And or extraordinary means where the burdens to the patient primarily outweigh the benefits. And then you've got a futile procedure which no longer is effective, usually because the pathological condition of the patient has deteriorated such as to render that procedure futile or ineffective. So that's the way I would explain it. And you probably have cases that would illustrate the point.
Oh, yeah. And we've had personal family cases that have demonstrated that point and are demonstrating them even now, and many cases in the hospital. And, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and to have this show in general is we need more doctors, clinicians, ethicists that can get onto hospital committees like you were onto ethical committees, so that there can be some reasonable guidance. We have so many healthcare providers now that have really lost any concept of kind of a Judeo-Christian background, and have kind of lost the concept of, that we were created, that we have a creator, that there's a dignity to the human being. And, if we have healthcare providers that, are not worshiping God, they're worshiping something. And usually it ends up being something financial or something, personal in their gain. And it like you said, it goes off the rails very quickly when people are not guided by the dignity of the human being as created by God.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. And it's really valuable to be able to participate in an ethics committee, even one at a big secular hospital like Carolina's Medical Center. There were some great conversations in that ethics committee. And there's some really good people. I didn't always see eye to eye with them because, to your point, they were coming with other agendas, often different worldviews. I would say if a pro-life person is going to get on one of these committees, do a lot of listening. I spent a good 6 months mostly listening to what people said, really trying to understand, how I could intervene in the discussions to have a positive impact. And, you're going to hear some things that you're going to recognize as immoral. I remember, there were discussions of, acts that, from a Catholic perspective, they would certainly be, it was a feeding tube that was removed because there was nothing more we could do. Or, discussions of artificial reproduction, things like that. You're not going to convince people that, you can't ever do these things because many of the people in the room are coming from a completely different standpoint. But you do realize, at certain points, you can intervene and help people to understand the Catholic point of view, the pro-life point of view, and you can really do a lot of good that way. And you also build trust and relationships where you can talk about the difficult things and disagree, and still remain friends at the end of it.
Yeah, and it's it gives you an opportunity to evangelize, and it's really not about strict rules that we're forcing people to do things that are against their will, or following some set of rules that are handed down by the Vatican or somebody somewhere far away. It really is about sitting down, caring with the families, caring with the healthcare providers, listening to them, like you said, understanding the dilemmas, because some of them are extremely complicated, extremely complex, and trying to work through those in an ethical way that respects the dignity of not only the patient, but also the dignity of the families, the dignity of the healthcare workers. I have coworkers who have felt like they were forced to do procedures and forced to do things that were against their ethical morals simply because they were an employee. So, we have to bring all these people into the conversation. I think, those ethics committees are really important. So we're going to break away for a second. When we come back, we're going to talk with Dr. Brown about the Dobbs versus Jackson post Roe v. Wade landscape and how that's affecting healthcare.
Are you a man searching for the truth? Find answers and fellowship in the Carolina Catholic Man Cave every Saturday from noon until 7 p.m. only on the Carolina Catholic Media Network. The Catholic Church sends us into a bruised and broken world. No matter how busy we are or how much we struggle to make sense of the madness around us, we are called to perform a work of great value for the evangelization of the world. In 2015, a small group of local media pioneers listened and answered this call of the Second Vatican Council, and Carolina Catholic Radio was born. Today, we are the Carolina Catholic Media Network and broadcast the truth of Jesus Christ on 7 distinct platforms to meet the demands of today's media consumers. Our network produces more original local programming than nearly any other EWTN affiliate nationwide, and each of our hosts are committed to educate, inform, inspire, and enrich lives no matter where they are on their journey of faith. Catholic media consumption has a direct impact on our lives. It helps us learn, teach, and practice our faith. And in a world that seeks to cancel the truth, we need it more than ever before. Now, through the end of 2022, we need your support and ask you to join our Circle of Friends giving campaign. As a Carolina Catholic community, we invite you to sponsor or join a circle with those whom you live, practice, and share passion for the faith. Consider sponsoring a circle to memorialize a loved one by asking your friends and family to donate to us in their honor. Or join a circle sponsored by your favorite local program host. There are many possibilities. It is together as a circle of friends, our voice, our community, and our faith will be strong, leaving a legacy for those who follow our footsteps. Join us today at carolinacatholicmedia.org.
Welcome back to the show, and we have today with us Dr. Grattan Brown, who has graduate degrees in literature and philosophies and a doctorate in theology. We are talking a little bit about medical futility and extraordinary means, and I want to kind of segue into what's going on now in the post-Roe versus Wade landscape, Dobbs versus Jackson, Mississippi Supreme Court decision that came down that essentially reverted the abortion laws back to the state level. And so it does seem like, we've heard a lot in the media recently about abortion. There's been kind of a lot of fear-mongering and things going on about, women are not going to get health care, that type of thing. What's your response to that and to, what's going to happen with health care, and what are the important things that we need to consider going into this after the Dobbs decision?
Well, my first reaction was shock, and I was appalled at the rhetoric out there. Mm-hmm. Because, as you said, they suggested, and you found stories in the media where hospitals were turning away women for life-threatening medical complications in pregnancy. And you know what all those complications and situations are better than I. But I can remember thinking, well, Dobbs doesn't change emergency care for pregnant women one bit. And I could see why people were confused, but I tried to come up with a common sense way of understanding this, and I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, pregnant women never needed Roe in the first place in order to receive medical care. They don't tell me that doctors weren't treating ectopic pregnancies long before Roe. And so I was shocked that people would be fooled by the idea that women would be turned away. And especially that doctors wouldn't make this distinction. But then I started thinking about it. I said, yes, but they are confused. And how could that be? And, I think 50 years of Roe have further distorted people's ability for ethical discernment. And they really are genuinely confused and frightened.
Yeah, let me.
For example, yeah.
I was just going to say, let me read this little excerpt from the New York Times article in October. Their article entitled, "What Does Abortion Mean?" The Times wrote, major medical societies and medical billing codes define abortion as any procedure that terminates a pregnancy, whether that pregnancy is wanted or unwanted, whether a woman is seeking the procedure to clean out her uterus after a miscarriage or because of a dire fetal diagnosis, or to terminate a pregnancy that she had not expected. What is your response to that?
Well, first of all, that way of defining abortion, it overlooks all the big moral differences that it then goes on to list in the last part of that little quote. So there's a huge difference between eliminating an unwanted child and resolving life-threatening complications during the pregnancy. There's a huge moral difference if the dire fetal diagnosis that the quote mentioned concerns a mortal danger to the woman's life or the death of the child shortly after birth. Both of those are terrible, the danger to the woman's life and the death of a child shortly after birth. But the dire fetal diagnosis doesn't justify directly ending the child's life in order to avoid either one. And then the quote mentioned cleaning out a woman's uterus after a miscarriage. Well, abortion doesn't even come up because the pregnancy is already ended. So even by the New York Times' own definition, abortion is terminating a pregnancy. In that case, there's no more pregnancy to terminate because the child has already died. If they're really thinking that the doctor is managing or the woman is in the process of miscarrying, then the doctor is really managing the complications of a pregnancy that's ending naturally. And the quote completely overlooks all of those moral distinctions, trying to make the ethical abortion debate go away. But that's no way to have a serious discussion about important matters in a society. So people are confused, especially when the same technical procedure is used to manage a difficult pregnancy, and the same procedure is used to carry out an elective abortion. I can see why people are confused. And then I think you've written about the problem of doctors wanting to lower their risk, and so they're using those procedures not really as a last resort in order to manage complications in pregnancy, but really earlier on when maybe they could have managed the difficult pregnancy differently or even help the woman give birth to the child, but rather opting for an elective abortion earlier on.
Yeah, as medical technology advances, we're seeing more and more intrauterine surgeries performed for fetal defects. And, there are doctors that are stepping up. They are treating the fetus as a patient and, offering to provide medical care to correct medical problems rather than just default to abortion.
Yeah, well, that's great, and God bless them.
Yeah, so you had talked about, you kind of list these three scenarios of medical emergencies, elective abortions, and disabilities as all kind of, trying to bring this, into something that's understandable for the layperson. And the layperson can be very easily swayed, and even medical providers can, because they get very scared and antsy about possible liability and that type of thing. And then, of course, the pro-abortion healthcare folks are going to say, oh, well, they might even just deny services and then use it as an excuse to deny services that should not be denied, such as the treatment of an ectopic pregnancy, chorioamnionitis, or something like that. So, we talk about the principle of double effect. Talk a little bit about that in these very difficult cases of such as chorioamnionitis, where there's, an infection in the uterus. Essentially, the baby is completely covered with infection and is infected themselves, and this is bringing risk to the mother, as well as maybe an ectopic pregnancy or something like that could rupture and injure the mother or kill the mother. Talk about the concept of double effect when you're talking about treatment of these tough cases.
Okay, sure. The principle of double effect essentially says that you can perform a procedure that you can foresee might end the life of a child or will end the life of a child, but that's not really your intention, and it's not your goal. It's what you would call a foreseeable, regrettable side effect that is not your intention. And one of the ways that abortion rhetoric confuses people is to try to say that intention doesn't matter, that the only intention is really to terminate a pregnancy. But what this rhetoric overlooks is that there's always more, that the intention to end a pregnancy is never really the only intention at play. And there's a big difference between the intention to resolve life-threatening complications in a pregnancy and the intention to end a child's life. But sometimes it's hard to get people to see the different intentions at play and to distinguish them so that they can see clearly, what is an immoral act from one that it's moral, it's ethical, but it's difficult. It's a difficult circumstance in which you can't wish away all the things that you don't want to happen. But it's in precisely those situations where you can't avoid some unhappy circumstances that the principle of double effect comes into play. And it's simply the principle of double effect says you can act, even though some of these bad effects are going to happen. And it doesn't mean that you're acting immorally. So here's how I try to get people to understand these intentionality more easily. There are three different, I described three different scenarios related to abortion. They're not all abortion, as I hope you'll see. I'll go through them quickly, then we can talk about them. The first scenario is just a medical emergency. The mother wants the child, but life-threatening complications emerge, and so a doctor is going to intervene in order to help the woman safely give birth, if that's possible. And if the doctor cannot help the woman give birth safely, well, then they're going to intervene to save the woman's life, even if they can foresee that the child is not going to survive, either because of the medical condition or because the procedure is going to result in the child's death. But is legitimate. It's a legitimate procedure by the principle of double effect, and it's not what most people mean today when they say abortion. So it seems better to me to use a phrase like medical emergency rather than abortion at all. Mm-hmm. And scenario two is really what people mean today by abortion. And in this scenario, the pregnant mother does not want the child. But the pregnancy is progressing normally so that the woman can expect to give birth to the child. In this scenario, the doctor, of course, intervenes to end the pregnancy by ending the life of the child. So they intend to end the life of the child, which is not the case in the first scenario. The best description then for this kind of scenario is an elective abortion, because the abortion is chosen without the medical need. And in that case, it aborts the pregnancy, but it does so by killing the child. The most difficult scenario, the number 3, is disability. And here, the pregnant mother wants her child, and the pregnancy is progressing normally, so she can expect to give birth to the child. But prenatal testing reveals that the child suffers from a disability or maybe a pathology. You hear about Down syndrome or anencephaly. And so the pregnant mother decides that she won't give birth to the child despite the fact that she wants it. And so the doctor intervenes to end the pregnancy and ends the life, and does so by ending the life of the child. And this is a much more difficult and fraught situation, but truth be told, it's also an elective abortion. Mm-hmm. Those are the 3 scenarios that I describe in order to try to get people to see how doctors intend and act and think differently in each one.
Yeah, the result might always end up in a dead child, but the intention and going into it can be very, very different. Okay, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can get other healthcare workers involved in kind of promoting a cultural life in healthcare today. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
The Catholic Church sends us into a bruised and broken world. No matter how busy we are or how much we struggle to make sense of the madness around us, we are called to perform a work of great value for the evangelization of the world. In 2015, a small group of local media pioneers listened and answered this call of the Second Vatican Council, and Carolina Catholic Radio was born. Today, we are the Carolina Catholic Media Network and broadcast the truth of Jesus Christ on 7 distinct platforms to meet the demands of today's media consumers. Our network produces more original local programming than nearly any other EWTN affiliate nationwide, and each of our hosts are committed to educate, inform, inspire, and enrich lives no matter where they are on their journey of faith. Catholic media consumption has a direct impact on our lives. It helps us learn, teach, and practice our faith. And in a world that seeks to cancel the truth, we need it more than ever before. Now, through the end of 2022, we need your support and ask you to join our Circle of Friends giving campaign. As a Carolina Catholic community, we invite you to sponsor or join a circle with those whom you live, practice, and share passion for the faith. Consider sponsoring a circle to memorialize a loved one by asking your friends and family to donate to us in their honor. Or join a circle sponsored by your favorite local program host. There are many possibilities. It is together as a circle of friends, our voice, our community, and our faith will be strong, leaving a legacy for those who follow our footsteps. Join us today at carolinacatholicmedia.org. Are you a man searching for the truth? Find answers and fellowship in the Carolina Catholic Man Cave every Saturday from noon until 7 p.m. only on the Carolina Catholic Media Network.
Welcome back, and we are talking with Dr. Grattan Brown, Catholic ethicist. And coming off that last segment, we were talking about, when I talk with pro-choice people about a baby that dies in a medical emergency, they say, well, see, there's no difference. You're both times you're ending up with a dead child, whether it's elective or whether it's a medical emergency. But so I usually use this example. I say, suppose a building's on fire, it's an emergency, and a fireman runs in there, and he's trying to save two people, and he's got his hands full with one and another hand on another one, and maybe the floor collapses and one person's dangling there, and he cannot save both people, and the other person slips and falls down into the burning fire, and he doesn't jump in to go get that burning person. He takes the other person that he has and is able to save, and he takes them outside. And so that's a situation where there's an emergency. He's trying to save two people, but he can only save one. Now that's one scenario. The second scenario is, what if he goes in there, he sees two people, he says, you know what, I can't save both of them, and he shoots one and carries the other one out. That's kind of what abortion does in medical emergencies. Where people are, well, I shouldn't say in medical emergencies, but in people say, there's a disability or something. That's the difference. Is abortion directly violently attacks a person in the womb, and even if but when in a situation where a patient is having a medical emergency and a doctor is trying to save both of them, unfortunately, sometimes say the baby is very infected. And has to come out to clean out the womb because now the mother is septic and has bacteria through her bloodstream, then they're doing whatever they can to help save the mother. And unfortunately, as a side effect, and we're talking about double effect earlier, the principle of double effect, the baby dies. So, there's very, intentionality is very important. And unfortunately, sometimes we cannot save both people. So, one thing I wanted to talk about is how can we get other healthcare providers involved in pro-life medicine and pro-life ethics. And, there are thousands of people out there who have great stories that we could collect and kind of share that there are other people in this struggle. I think the vast majority of physicians, there's a very vocal minority who are very pro-choice. I think there's a vast number of people who are somewhere in the middle, and there's a lot of pro-life physicians who are very pro-life, who got into medicine to help and to heal and not to figure out how to kill people. And I think we need to hear more of those people become more vocal so that we can build a better community. And so, talk a little bit about, the project that you're working on, Dr. Brown.
When I was so appalled by the pro-choice response to Dobbs, I thought immediately of some of the articles I could write to try to help people understand with the debate that they were actually engaged in. But then I thought, well, there's what you really need are pro-life doctors who can show society and patients how to think through these difficult circumstances, and also help them to understand why they don't perform elective abortions, why there are better options for women, and from a medical perspective and a human perspective put together, why elective abortion is not the best option for women. And I thought, well, let's find some pro-life doctors and have them talk about their, the stories of some of the patients they've cared for. I was thinking back to some of the meaningful conversations on the ethics committee that I had heard. I was thinking back to a friend who I helped him write a book. He was dying of ALS about 6 or 7 years ago. And I helped him write a book about his experience. And it turned out to be such a powerful book. And I thought, well, there are pro-life doctors there who have been practicing the kind of standard of care that we really need after Dobbs and after 50 years of Roe. the way that they practice medicine should become the standard in all the 50 states as the 50 states begin debating the laws under which doctors, will care for patients. So I thought by collecting these stories, we can demonstrate those higher standards of care that should have been the higher standards all along. Also, pro-life doctors are really being vilified in the public square by some of that pro-choice rhetoric. So we need to personalize and humanize the face of pro-life medicine in the face of this rhetoric. Also, when a woman gets pregnant, she goes out on the internet, she looks around to get, some idea of what to expect. And those pro-life doctors can educate patients about how they should be treated. Should a complication arise in their pregnancy? Women who are frightened about their pregnancy, who maybe are tempted to seek an elective abortion, it's doctors who can help assure them that better care is there and that there are people around who will care for them in the different ways that they need to be cared for. And then finally, in the political sphere, I think pro-life doctors' stories can help defend medical conscience and the free exercise of religion rights and influence the political discussion about state legislation on abortion. So I see a number of reasons why it'd be great to have a bunch of pro-life doctors out there just start telling the stories of what they've learned practicing medicine in a rose-shaped world that now is getting ready to be a Dobbs-shaped world.
Yeah, I think that in the the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, I think that doctors were very well respected. Everyone knew that they were out for their best interest, and really, since Roe v. Wade and the kind of rise of euthanasia, assisted suicide, different stuff like that, people don't trust doctors anymore, and I think that's something that we really have an opportunity to rectify. And part of that is sharing those stories. Of course, I've had the abortion pill reversal stuff come up many times, but probably a more interesting story that I personally had was one where a patient had I'd gotten called from the sidewalk from some counselors that I know, and a woman had gone in for an abortion, and she was around 14 weeks. And they were going to do a DNC type of abortion or D&E, and where they evacuate the baby. And she had already had the seaweed sticks put in the laminaria in order to dilate her cervix so that they could go in and do the abortion. And she had changed her mind, and she wanted to keep her baby. So they called me. And so, what we need to get doctors to understand is we have two patients here. And mothers, even mothers that are aborting their babies, know that this is a person inside of them. No one ever says, I'm pregnant with a fetus. No one ever, they don't say I'm having an embryo. They say I'm having a baby. They understand, even those that are aborting know that this is a person. And that's what we as healthcare providers need to understand and to support and see that, yes, this is a patient. Let's do what we can to help that patient. So I said, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but just come to the emergency room. And I was working at the hospital. I intercepted her when she came in, got her into a room. I told the emergency room doctors who I knew there that I'll take care of her. And I examined her, with the nurse, and I saw that there was, what looked like some infection coming out of her cervix. I was able to remove the laminaria, the little dilating sticks, did an ultrasound, saw that the baby was alive, had a heartbeat, was kicking around, had plenty of fluid, so it did not look like the amniotic sac had been ruptured. So I said, look, the baby is okay. You have a dilated cervix now, and you're at high risk for losing this baby, but let's put you on some antibiotics. And the woman's body is amazing at healing. And I said, let's hope for the best. So that's what she did. She went home, she took the antibiotics, saw her back a few days later, The cervix was already closing. The baby was fine, and she went on to deliver a healthy baby. Most doctors, I'm afraid, in that situation would say, sorry, there's nothing that can be done. You need to proceed with the abortion because it's too high risk that you're going to have an infection that's going to hurt you, that's going to hurt the baby. They'll come up with all these excuses to shove the liability off of themselves and off of the mother and onto the baby. And the baby is the one person here who has no voice, no choice, and accepts all the liability and all the damage from these decisions.
Well, it's a great story, Matt, and highlights so many things that are problematic in a rose-shaped kind of a world. Transferring the risk to the baby, really without even having to confront the fact that that's what you're doing. Pressure put on patients to abort when they really don't want to. To your point, they know that there's a child inside of them, and 10 years afterwards, they're going to know that, well, I could have had a child who's 10 years old. One doctor who was telling me, another doctor was telling me a story about a patient she had, out-of-control diabetic, in her late 40s, pregnant, decided, heard all of the pressure to abort the child, decided, no, I want this baby. So the doctor telling me this story, worked with her, complied on the controlling the diabetes, ultimately gave birth to a child. Went on to see the child graduate from high school, get married, and imagine, a life of happiness was really replaced a life of what would have been regret. And so, those pro-life doctors can have such an amazing impact. I would like more of them to speak out and say what they've learned from practicing pro-life medicine in a rose-shaped medical world, because that's not the world that we need to stay in.
Dr. Brown, how can healthcare providers contact you? Can they get you through whereiswisdom.today, or?
Better would be simply my email address, grattan.brown@gmail.com. That's GRATTAN.BROWN
Great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on to the show. We'll probably have some more things to get into in future shows. I look forward to it. But thanks again for all your work and for helping me form my Catholic conscience in the ethical approach to healthcare.
Well, thank you. It's why I studied theology in the first place, and thanks for all the work you're doing. It's really inspiring.
And any listeners out there that want to hear more of this type of programming, please go to our website, carolinacatholicmedia.org, and you can donate there to support these ministries. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
You've been listening to Prescription Life with Dr. Matthew Harrison on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network, 1270 AM Charlotte, and streaming at carolinacatholicmedia.org and on the Carolina Catholic Media app.